Battlestar Galactica has some of the most iconic ships in all of science fiction, from fighters held together with spit and prayers to capital ships that could glass a planet. But not every vessel gets the attention it deserves. So today, I'm breaking down every single ship from the series and everything that makes them special, starting with one that technically shouldn't even exist. Blackbird, this ship is duct tape and desperation made airborne. Chief Petty Officer Galen Tyrol and his deck crew built the Blackbird from scratch aboard Galactica using scavenged parts pulled from across the entire fleet. No factory, no supply chain, just exhausted engineers who decided they weren't done fighting yet. The concept was straightforward. Conventional Vipers couldn't penetrate Cylon defense networks without getting shredded, so instead of trying to outgun them, Tyrol designed a stealth fighter that could slip past their sensors entirely. Recon missions, precision strikes, the kind of work that gets you killed in anything with a standard radar signature, and it worked for a while, but it had a tragically short operational lifespan because one prototype can't fix a systemic problem. You can't duct tape your way out of extinction, but the attempt itself mattered. In a fleet that had lost everything, building something new from nothing was an act of defiance, which is, you know, kind of the whole show. But if the Blackbird was born out of desperation, the ship it was meant to complement has been proving itself since before the war even started. Viper Mk2. The Viper Mark II is the AK-47 of space. Ugly, old, mechanically simple, and still killing things long after every reasonable person agreed it should have been retired. This thing served as the workhorse fighter of the colonial fleet during the entire First Cylon War, and then just kept going for decades afterward. At only 8.4 meters long, it's not exactly intimidating on paper, but here's the thing, it's powered by a small nuclear reactor, which means extended patrols and sustained combat operations without constantly limping back to refuel. Its weapons are kinetic energy cannons, not lasers, and those cannons could be supplemented with missiles and even nuclear ordnance if the situation called for it, which, you know, it often did. But the real story of the Mark II isn't its specs. It's the fact that the design remained combat effective even as the colonial fleet rolled out Mark IIIs, Mark IVs, all the way up to Mark VIIs. Newly refitted Mark II squadrons were still active at the time of Galactica's decommissioning ceremony. Museum pieces basically. Veteran pilots didn't care. They'd flown these things for years. They trusted them, and when the Cylons hacked every modern fighter in the fleet, that trust turned out to be the difference between extinction and survival. Nostalgia saved humanity. Let that sink in. But the ship that was supposed to replace the Mark II, that's a whole different story. Viper Mk7. The Viper Mk7 was the most advanced fighter humanity ever built. It was also the easiest for the Cylons to kill, which is, you know, not ideal. On paper, this thing was a masterpiece. About 32 feet long, nearly 10 feet tall with the landing gear down, and packed with fully integrated avionics that fed pilots real-time tactical data and enhanced battle management that the Mk2 could only dream of. Forward-facing cannons, a missile bay underneath carrying up to 8 conventional missiles or a single nuclear warhead. It could fight in atmosphere, fight in space, and its automated support systems reduced pilot workload so much that flying one felt less like combat and more like supervising. But here's where it gets dark. Every single one of those advanced computer systems, the ones that made the Mk7 superior in literally every measurable way, were networked, integrated, connected, and when the Cylons attacked, they didn't need to outfly these things. They just uploaded a signal, shut the avionics down remotely, and turned the most capable fighter in the colonial fleet into a floating coffin. Pilots couldn't fire, couldn't maneuver, couldn't do anything except die. Meanwhile, the ancient Mk2s sitting in Galactica's museum? No networked systems, no integrated computers to hack, too old to compromise. They survived specifically because nobody had bothered to upgrade them. There's a lesson buried in that irony somewhere, and it's not a comfortable one, but if you think a fighter being turned against its own pilot is unsettling, wait until you see a fighter that doesn't need a pilot at all. Cylon Raider. Here's something that should make your skin crawl. The Cylon Raider doesn't have a pilot. The Cylon Raider is the pilot. Through biomechanical engineering, Cylon consciousness integrates directly with the vessel, eliminating every mechanical input between thought and action. When a Raider banks left, it's not because something pushed a stick. It's because the ship wanted to go left, which is, you know, not ideal. Think about what that means in a dogfight. A Viper pilot sees a threat, processes it, moves their hand, adjusts the stick, and the ship responds. A Raider just reacts. Zero delay. The entire intermediary layer of human reflexes gets deleted, and it shows. These things can pull 7 Gs in combat acceleration. Though normal operations sit around 1 G, they're armed with 2 Type A aggressor light autocannons plus various missile configurations, but the weapons almost feel secondary. The real threat is the speed. Cylon tactical doctrine with raiders wasn't about sustained dogfighting. It was about chasing down slower targets and executing rapid strikes before anyone could mount a proper response. The whole design philosophy prioritized closing distance and hitting hard. At roughly 5 feet tall and 22.6 tons empty, the Raider is compact, fast, and completely redesigned from its first Cylon war predecessor. Humans strap into machines. Cylons become the machine. That's not just an engineering choice, that's a philosophical divide made metal. But if the Raider is the Cylon answer to the Viper, the Colonials had their own answer to versatility, and it could do basically everything. Raptor Vipers get all the glory, every poster, every wallpaper, every dramatic slow motion launch sequence. But here's the thing, Vipers didn't keep people alive, Raptors did. The Raptor was the Colonial fleet's multi-purpose spacecraft, and when I say multi-purpose, I mean this thing did literally everything. Reconnaissance, electronic warfare, transport, combat, search and rescue. If a mission existed and it was dangerous, a Raptor was flying it. Standard crew of 2, a pilot and an EKO with room for additional passengers crammed in the back. Not exactly luxury seating, but nobody's complaining when you're being pulled out of a combat zone. Here's where it gets interesting. The Raptor had its own short-range FTL drive on a craft this small. That meant a 2-person crew could jump into hostile territory, gather intel, and jump back out before the Cylons even registered the contact. Vipers couldn't do that. Vipers had to stay within range of their Battlestar at all times. Raptors could operate independently, making them the single most tactically flexible asset in the entire fleet. The Mark II variant upgraded the propulsion layout with 2 sublight engines mounted on pylons beneath the upper dorsal fin. The craft also carried synthetic gravity systems for extended missions, because when you're the ship that goes everywhere nobody else wants to go, comfort becomes a survival requirement. In an apocalypse, specialists die, generalists adapt. The Raptor was the ultimate generalist, and the crews who flew them faced the most demanding assignments in the fleet without a fraction of the recognition, which is, you know, not ideal. But if the Raptor was the fleet's Swiss Army knife, the next ship was the scalpel nobody was supposed to know about. Valkyrie class. The Valkyrie class is the ship that did everything right and still got killed in the first 5 minutes. Here's the thing, this design was already serving during the first Cylon War, meaning it's been part of the Colonial fleet for decades before the fall. While newer designs like the Mercury class got all the attention, the Valkyrie kept earning its place through sheer reliability, and somehow, despite its age, it never stopped being useful. It was never meant to go toe-to-toe with a Jupiter class in a slugfest. The Valkyrie was built for light strike operations and reconnaissance, basically the scout that could punch back if it needed to, and it punched pretty hard. 22 dual-purpose kinetic energy weapon batteries gave it serious anti-ship and anti-fighter capability for something its size. 4 rearward-facing sublight engines mounted in pods on the outer hull kept it moving, and at least 1 FTL drive meant it could jump independently without babysitting from a larger fleet. But here's where it gets complicated. The FTL drive sat in a half-exposed dorsal position, just sitting there, partially armored at best, which meant the one system you absolutely need for survival, the thing that lets you disappear when a fight goes sideways, was basically waving at enemy targeting systems. It's like putting your car's gas tank on the roof. The Battlestar Valkyrie herself, BS-41, spent years running classified operations and Capricorn defense patrols, continually upgraded, continually proving that older didn't mean obsolete. And then the fall happened, and she was destroyed in the opening hours. 0 ceremony, 0 last stand, just gone. But if you think losing a warship is tragic, wait until you see what happened to a luxury liner that accidentally became the most important civilian vessel in human history. Colonial 1, a luxury cruise liner, has 0 business being the most important ship in the fleet, but that's exactly what Colonial 1 became, because civilization isn't a place, it's a decision. Before the fall, this ship was Colonial Heavy 798, a standard passenger vessel pulling out of Caprica with tourists, bureaucrats, and a Secretary of Education nobody particularly cared about. Laura Roslin was basically attending a retirement party for a ship. Then the Cylons nuked everything, and suddenly she was the highest highest-ranking government official left alive. Here's where it gets interesting. Rosalind didn't just commandeer the ship, she transformed it. A vessel built for cocktail lounges and reclining seats became the official residence of the president of the 12 colonies. Staterooms became strategy rooms. The bar probably became a filing cabinet. She gathered survivors from stranded ships across the system, organizing a ragtag civilian fleet around this one converted liner, a pleasure craft coordinating the survival of a species, which is, you know, not ideal. But Colonial One's real function wasn't logistical, it was symbolic. As long as that ship flew with a president aboard, the colonies still existed, not as planets, those were glass, but as an idea, as a people who still held elections and argued about policy while running from genocide. Every time Rosalind stood in that converted cabin and made a decision, she was telling everyone that humanity hadn't quit. The contrast between what Colonial One was built for and what it became is the entire thesis of the show in one ship. But if you think a converted cruise liner is an odd addition to the fleet, wait until you see the ship that brought an actual luxury resort to the stars. Cloud 9, here's something nobody really thinks about when they talk about the fleet's survival. You can keep people alive with food, water, and air recyclers. That's biology. But if you want to keep a civilization alive, you need a casino, a bar, and a 5-star restaurant, which sounds ridiculous until you actually think about it for more than 10 seconds. Cloud 9 was a massive luxury liner with one of the most distinctive designs in the entire fleet. Before the fall, it was exactly what it sounds like, a floating vacation. Restaurant, theater, casino, multiple bars, hotel rooms, the works. The kind of place where you'd blow half your paycheck on a long weekend and feel great about it. After the fall, it became something way more important. Cloud 9 served as the gathering location for the Quorum of 12, making it the literal center of civilian political decision-making in the fleet. Democracy was being practiced inside what was essentially a cruise ship. But here's the thing, those entertainment facilities weren't some leftover luxury the fleet tolerated out of sentimentality. They were load-bearing walls of civilization's sanity. People who've lost everything, who are running from extinction and recycled air, need somewhere that feels normal. The bars and the casino weren't frivolous. They were the last place in the universe that felt like home. And then a thermonuclear warhead detonated aboard the ship in orbit over New Caprica. Cloud 9 was obliterated instantly, along with several nearby vessels caught in the blast. Vaporized. The fleet didn't just lose a ship that day, they lost the last room in the house where anyone could pretend things were okay. But if losing Cloud 9 was devastating for human morale, the Cylons had their own ship they couldn't afford to lose. And it was far more terrifying. The Resurrection Ship. Imagine fighting an enemy you literally cannot kill. You shoot them down, they come back, you destroy their ship, they wake up in a new body, you win the battle, and every single soldier you just eliminated is combat ready again within hours. That's what the Resurrection Ship made possible, and it's the single most terrifying concept in the entire show. For roughly 40 years, the Cylons operated these specialized vessels equipped with consciousness transfer technology. When a Cylon was destroyed, their mind got beamed to the nearest resurrection ship, downloaded into a fresh body, and sent right back into the fight. Zero permanent consequences, which meant Cylon forces could adopt tactics that were suicidally aggressive by any human standard. Because why wouldn't they? Death was just a temporary inconvenience. A bad Monday. This is the reason the war felt completely unwinnable. You're burning through ammunition, losing pilots, watching friends die in cockpits, and the enemy treats the whole thing like a respawn timer in a video game. Every Cylon you destroy costs you resources. Every Cylon that gets destroyed costs them nothing. But here's the kicker. The consciousness transfer had a range limit. Cylons operating beyond that range faced something they'd almost forgotten existed. Permanent death. The moment colonial forces figured this out, everything changed. Galactica and Pegasus coordinated a joint strike and successfully destroyed a resurrection ship, along with its associated fleet elements. For the first time, Cylon casualties were real, permanent, irreversible. That single operation turned the entire dynamic of the war on its head. The Cylons went from fearless to cautious overnight. Turns out the threat of actual death makes everyone reconsider their life choices. But if the resurrection ship was the scariest support vessel in the Cylon fleet, wait until we talk talk about the warship it was supporting, Cylon Battlestar. This is the thing that made Galactica run. Not walk, not jog, run. The Cylon Battlestar housed roughly 300 raiders in its belly, could jump across star systems, and operated without a single visible engine. I don't know what to tell you, the design itself is immediately alien. Two elongated hull sections stacked in opposition, creating this distinctive Y-shaped cross-section that looks nothing like anything humans ever built, and that's not an accident. Every design choice on a Battlestar reflects a completely different philosophy of war. Where the Colonials built gun platforms designed to stand their ground and brawl, the Cylons built carrier swarms. The Battlestar's primary offensive punch came from missile systems, both conventional and nuclear, and while it appeared to carry a limited number of missiles at any given time, the reserves seemed essentially bottomless, just wave after wave. But here's where the asymmetry gets fascinating. Battlestars were actually weaker than Colonial Battlestars in a straight-up slugfest. Strip away the fighter screen, and a Battlestar could tear one apart at close range. The Cylons knew this, which is why they almost never fought fair. They relied almost entirely on their fighter complement for protection. 300 raiders launching from organic hangars, literal fleshy cavities inside the ship to form an offensive and defensive screen. The hangars themselves looked like something biological, not mechanical. Less aircraft carrier, more hive. So you've got a ship that carries an army of fighters, regenerates its crews through resurrection technology, and compensates for its lack of raw durability by drowning you in raiders before you ever get close enough to land a punch. Against that, Galactica had armor plating and stubbornness. The fact that humanity survived more than one encounter with these things is genuinely remarkable, but surviving a Battlestar is one thing. What happens when you find a second Battlestar hiding in the wreckage of civilization? Pegasus. Pegasus was the ship that had everything. Better guns, better armor, better technology, a crew that actually wanted to be there, and a commanding officer who scared the absolute life out of everyone in a room. It was a Mercury-class Battlestar, one of the most advanced warships the colonies ever built, and it looked the part. With a crew complement exceeding 2,500, Pegasus was physically larger than Galactica in virtually every dimension that mattered. It carried a massive array of primary kinetic energy weapons across twin turrets and fixed mounts, backed up by point defense guns, conventional missiles, and nuclear warheads. A floating arsenal with a flight deck attached. Built roughly 20 years after the first Cylon War, Pegasus incorporated cutting-edge automated systems that made Galactica look like a museum piece, which, to be fair, Galactica literally was. Before the fall, officers actively sought assignment aboard Pegasus. Getting posted there was a career highlight, and then the worlds ended, and somehow, under Rear Admiral Helena Kane, Pegasus survived, one of exactly 2 Colonial Battlestars left in existence. Here's the thing though, for all that technological superiority, Pegasus didn't make it. During the exodus from New Caprica, Pegasus was sacrificed to cover the escape of Galactica and the civilian fleet. Rammed straight into the Cylon formation, no hesitation, the bigger, shinier, meaner Battlestar died so the old relic could keep flying. Which is, you know, not ideal if you're a Pegasus fan, but it proves something the show had been building toward the entire time. Every advantage in the world means nothing when 3 Battlestars are bearing down on you and the math simply doesn't work. Pegasus went out protecting the fleet it was built to serve, and that scene still has fans in absolute ruins years later. But if Pegasus was the ship that had everything and still died, then the ship that had nothing and somehow survived deserves its own conversation. Galactica, every ship in this video exists because of this one. Every fighter launched, every FTL jump calculated, every desperate last stand fought across the stars traces back to a single aging warship that had no business still being operational. Battlestar Galactica, designation BS-75, a Galactica-class Battlestar stretching 4,695 feet long and standing 601.43 feet tall, armed with 600 dual weapon systems capable of shredding anything from a raider to a base star, designed as a battleship carrier hybrid that could deploy hundreds of Vipers and still have enough firepower left over to slug it out with capital ships twice its age. On paper, a perfectly respectable warship. In practice, a museum piece. The oldest, most outdated Battlestar in the entire Colonial Navy, scheduled for decommissioning the day the world ended, and that's exactly why humanity survived. Here's the thing, when the Cylons launched their attack, they didn't win through superior numbers or brute force. They won through hacking. Every modern Battlestar in the fleet ran networked computer systems, and the Cylons walked through those networks like they owned them, shut down weapons, killed engines, turned the most advanced warships ever built into to floating coffins. Every technological advantage the colonial fleet had spent decades developing became the thing that destroyed them. But you can't hack what isn't connected. Galactica's computers were primitive, unnetworked, analog systems running on stubbornness and duct tape. The Cylons couldn't touch them. The ship that the Navy considered embarrassingly obsolete was the one ship their entire electronic warfare strategy couldn't crack. That's the paradox that defined everything. Galactica didn't survive despite being outdated. It survived because it was outdated. Every upgrade it never received, every modern system it never installed, every bureaucratic decision to leave the old girl running on yesterday's technology is the reason any humans are alive at all. And what it carried wasn't just refugees, it was the entire future of the human species. Every child born in that fleet, every election held, every argument about democracy and freedom and what it means to be human happened because one stubborn ancient warship refused to die. So say we all. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.